So.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, Pedro speaking. Hi, Gesa. Just wanted to let you know that I'm here if you need any help with anyone, with anything.
Thank you. I will happily mute you now. So yes, it's 5 o'clock sharp, and I'm from Germany originally, so I like starting sharp. So welcome everyone to the webinar. I'm Gesa Praetorius. I work at Linnaeus University and University of Southeastern Norway, and I have the pleasure to be the host for today's Resilience Engineering Association's webinar. Today we will discuss the effects of the pandemic on the shipping domain, and I hope so. It's not going to be just things are bad. We will also try to see what are the opportunities we can seize out of the situation, out of the current crisis. We have 3 experts from the maritime domain: Mikael Lidmark from Seko Sjöfolk, which is the Swedish Seafarers Union; Cecilia Österman, who is a senior lecturer at Linnaeus University; and Lena Göthberg, who is the host of the Shipping Podcast. So I'm very happy that these 3 agreed to be here, so thanks a lot. In terms of the logistics for this webinar, you're all muted. However, we would like you to pose questions in the question and answer panel that you can see in the Zoom. This webinar is also recorded, so afterwards we'll find the recording on the website. If you want to share that with colleagues or you want to continue to discuss with us afterwards, that's more than welcome. We ask you not to try to share your camera feed. You can do that, but it would be appreciated if you don't. We have about 1 hour, so I don't want to take that much time. 3 presentations. We will have about 40 minutes or something like that of the presentations or the speaker's time, and afterwards 20 to 15 minutes for discussions with everyone. So without further delay, I will actually give the floor to Mikael and just stop talking. So please, Mikael, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Gesa. And thank you very much for the invitation. Very fun to have the opportunity to speak for what do you say, organization with focus on research. Researchers are, rarely the ones that listen to me. It's often grumpy ship owners or angry personnel managers. So thank you for the invitation. Shipping, and what is shipping for you? Shipping for very, very many people is this. It's often very technical and it's often something very big. Here it's visualized by a huge container ship. This is, if you say what is shipping, many people are thinking just about this, a huge ship. For me, I would say shipping is something totally different. It's something very soft. this. It's the crew. The people on board the ship, the people that make large metal boxes travel from A to B. And here it's visualized by a crew from a Swedish car carrier company called Wallenius. And the big message I would like to give to you today, it's without the crews, there are no international trade at all. What are the effects of the COVID for the shipping industry? I have two pictures here, one before COVID and one during COVID. There has been a lot of these pictures, for example, improvements to the environment and congestions in the subway. But this one is very different because there are not so many, the difference is not so big in this picture. The shipping industry, it looks like it's not been suffering at all if you just look to this picture. But the big loser in the shipping industry, it's the cruise industry. That has a total lockdown. But the shipping industry in total has not got that total lockdown as the for example, the aviation. So that's very important to point out that. But even so, the impact has been different. It has been enormous, and enormous, I mean, especially for the crews. And that is what I will use my now 7 and 8 minutes to talk to you a little bit about the shipping crews during this pandemic of COVID. How are the crews affected by a closed world? If you are the key workers in a global world, as I'm a union person, so I like to use that word, key workers in a global world. These three images I have here is very negative. Small opportunities, the first one, small opportunities to go on an airplane. It's very difficult to even go on board it. And if you get the opportunity to get on board of an airplane, there may maybe not be people or companies providing flights. But the last image is the most devastating, the closed borders. I could fill this picture with a lot of more pictures. For example, on social facilities that you will be denied if you're coming to a port as a crew member, and so on and so on. I would like now to share with you a little picture of my family. And I now would like that you replace this picture in your mind of my family with your picture of the people that means the most to you. And now I want you to imagine a little bit more. I want you to imagine that you are a seafarer and that you work on a ship when a virus shuts down the whole world. And I want you to imagine that your salary, or the fact is that your salary is not just supporting your family, it also supports your parents, your partner's parents, your siblings, and your partner's siblings. You have been on board for 8 months, and you don't even know when you're going to get home. And the worst thing about this is that you haven't met your smallest child. It was born 2 months after you signed on. And you have not received salary for the last 2 months. The company you worked for terminated all contracts when the ship was laid up. But despite that you don't get paid, you're still on the ship because you have a closed world and you cannot get home. Can you feel the stress? This is not something that I have made up. This is reality of a Ukrainian sailor or seafarer that I have been in contact with for almost 2 months now. This is not the worst story. This is not the worst story of this Ukrainian, but it's he is not alone. He has around 50,000 colleagues around the world with a similar situation. And it ends in this. It ends in desperation. Desperation can take many forms, everything from a protest on Facebook to the ultimate form of desperation, which is suicide. Unfortunately, we have seen a number of suicide during this corona crisis. And that is the worst thing that can happen to a union person, is to get a call from a crew that has lost their friend through suicide. But I would go over to the more positive side. If all parties within the shipping industry work together, nothing can stop us, not even a pandemic. When we work together, we can repatriate seafarers despite there are almost no airports open, and despite that the borders are closed. So the short message here, together we can make things happen. The big solution. Yeah, the big solution is what I talked about before. It's the cooperations. And together we can handle this crisis, and together we can handle the next crisis, because there will be more crises. But the whole industry must speak the same language and put the individuals first. They must put the crew members first in line. And that is what the industry says today. Most personnel or most people within the industry says that personnel comes first. But when we're down the road and it's really action, they really don't mean it. So in short, they're also joint efforts. And I would like to say 3 specific ideas from us as a union that we think that could what do you say, easy up the next crisis, or stimulate for seafarers to rejoin with their families. The first thing I would like to talk to you about is an IMO or ILO visa. Visa is a very crucial thing with when you're a seafarer. With the global visa authorized by a UN organization as IMO or ILO, a seafarer could get on and off a ship more easily. The very concrete example of what visa, how important this is now, that Iranian sailors rarely don't get any jobs anymore. Not because they're bad sailors, but because they don't get visa. They don't get visa to the US, and if you have a ship going to the US, you don't have Iranian sailors on board. So a global visa is the first idea. A clear responsibility is my number 2. On a ship today, there can be maybe 10 and sometimes more nations involved. The ship is flagged in one country, the owner from another company, the cargo owners from a third company, the crew agents from a fourth, the insurance company from a fifth, and the recognized organization from a sixth. Then you have a crew from 4 different countries. So in that case, the responsibility is not so clear. When it comes to hull or cargo or hard things, there's often no complaints or no problems with the responsibility. But when it comes to people, the question of responsibility is not that simple. And the third thing I would like to talk to you about is the customer awareness. Knowledge and the knowledge about shipping and the condition of the seafarers among the consumer is very low. And that's why consumers never make demands on the shipping industry, because they don't know so much about it. So if we make consumers aware and they make demands on cargo owners, and the cargo owner starts making demands on shipping companies, and the shipping companies then make sure to hire on good terms and always see to the seafarers best, then we can go through the next crisis in much better ways. And as I said in the beginning, without crews, there are no international trades. So in good order, here's my contacts. And if you have any questions after, you can mail me directly. So Gesa, back to you.
Thank you, Mikael. I think the presentation gives us all a lot to think about, especially when it comes to consumer awareness and responsibility. Also, when we talk about resilience, we often talk about things are complex, but I think that you really nicely showed the true complexity of the operations that we have in shipping, involving many different parties, and also kind of leaving the people behind in that, because there's no clear ownership. So please remember again, everyone who's attending, you can ask questions in the question and answer panel that you have. And without me talking much more, I will hand over to Cecilia, who will talk more about seafarers as key workers.
Thank you very much. See if I can override Mikael's presentation, or if you have to take it down, I'm not sure. Can you take down your presentation, Mikael? Yeah, thank you. So, and as we say, great minds think alike. We choose unknowingly to each other, we choose rather almost the same title to our presentations. But I think that shows how important we really find this topic to be. So I'll talk a bit more about the seafarers as the invisible key workers essential for maintaining global trade. And as Mikael showed you the other picture, when you look at the shipping industry during the pandemic, you can see it as a duck. You know, it's gliding slowly on the water, looking very calm, composed, unruffled feathers. But underneath the surface, real people, like Mikael showed us, are paddling like the Dickens to actually maintain this global trade and uphold the business as usual. And the seafarers are paddling for all they're worth, hoping that they don't go under on the time. And we see as that seafarers have been among the hardest hit people from the fallout of the pandemic. So we see that while they are delivering this service, they're keeping up the business as usual, doing the job, the everyday job. They actually face both safety and health risk. And also now we can see, as Mikael showed us, increased physical and mental exhaustion due to the inability to return home or join the ship. And there have also been so many different measures taken to stop this. And even if we go back to the business as usual, when it is as it normally is, we know that it's no walk in the park. The job as usual is actually quite difficult as well, because despite significant changes we've seen over the years on work tasks on board modern ships, it's still one of the most hazardous occupations we know compared to shore-based occupations. We know that normal working conditions, they are characterized by long working hours, it's shift work, high demand and low control, conditions that we all know for previous research, for long time research, are well known to cause occupational stress and ill health. And seafarers are also among the most isolated group in the world, both in terms of social isolation, because they're on a ship and they're away from family and friends and home, but they're also isolated from emergency medical, primal health care, first responders. You can't just lift the telephone and call for the first responders if something happens. So you're both physically and socially distanced and isolated. And this has been increasingly apparent during the pandemic, where seafarers have been denied access to healthcare, for instance. But in addition, also on a normal day, the ship is not only a work environment, it's also a living environment. You live on board, and some for 10, 12 months, and during the pandemic, even longer than that. And as such, we know it's a high incidence of different psychological or mental stresses that affect health and also performance. So over time, we see that the symptoms have changed for seafarers' ill health. Of course, you still have the added possibility of drowning, as Mark Twain is supposedly to have said. But you see that it's not only the physical hardship, but it's also due to this shorter turnaround times. It's a growing demands for efficiency and a lot of fast workplace developments and new technology. We see that there's even a greater risk of elevated stress levels and fatigue that may have mental health effects. And times have changed. To the pictures to the left on the screen, you see the old Captain Haddock and Popeye the Sailor Man. And if you try to Google image seafarer, it's not really a happy sight. What we see there is largely reflects this older view on what a seafarer is and what a seafarer does. And I believe that this view on seafarers actually has had an impact on how seafarers have been treated during the pandemic, or is still treated during the pandemic, because times have changed. Seafarers now are knowledge workers. They have evolved into knowledge workers. They are operating in a very complex socio-technical system that demands high level of knowledge, but also concentration, cognitive demands during the planning operation, and increasingly administration of work also. So today there is no room for Popeye the Sailor Man or a constantly intoxicated Captain Haddock with explosive outbursts and is cursing. The seafarers as knowledge workers have, of course, the same needs, aspirations and wishes as everyone else, as Mikael's example with taking his own family as an example. And this is true, of course, for work and also life in general. And as I mentioned, I think this prevailing general view or the perception of what a seafarer is and looks like as being a drunk, disorderly and dubious bearer of diseases, in my view, this is likely to have actually affected the way the pandemic has been managed or ill-managed by some governments, and this really must change. Because it really has gone from bad to worse. As I said previously, even during normal conditions, seafarers report a high incidence of depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts. Seafarers, along with miners, are in statistics among the highest profession with the highest rates of suicide. And we know that these conditions, the high levels of stress, is associated with increased likelihood of injury and illness also while working on board. So this is actually not only a question of an individual problem related to health and well-being, which I believe, of course, is bad enough, but this is also a safety concern. And we could see that of the ship breaking outside Mauritius, for instance. But so this is not an individual problem, it's a systems problem, and it's an organizational problem, and it's a safety concern. And we also know from previous research before the pandemic that these mental health issues like depression, anxiety and and suicidal thoughts, they also increase during the extension of voyage. And especially so when you don't know, when you're forced to live in this uncertainty and you don't know when you're being allowed to leave home. And there are also reports of measures that has been done on vessels that are meant to, in a good way, to reduce the risk of the spread of the COVID-19, like prohibiting seafarers to use the gym on board, or prohibiting seafarers to spend time on deck in the fresh air and so forth. And measures like this is, now I'm a safety engineer, not a virologist, but in my view, I think that it's likely to have a very limited effect on the spread of the virus, but it has for certain a very big effect on the seafarer health, as well as this social isolation. And then we also have seen repeated breaches of national and EU legislation, laws, when it comes to the free movement of workers. In Sweden, we've had several examples of street-level bureaucrats in national agencies and customs officials that has at best interpreted legislation or perhaps even invented their own legislation to actually prevent the free movement of persons that should be in EU. That we are prohibiting seafarers to sign on or off ships within EU, or even making sure that a seafarer was not allowed to go ashore to buy a toothbrush in a small port in Sweden. But this seafarer being an EU national, he would be more than welcome to take his own car and drive up from the neighbor country and come in and buy as many toothbrushes he wanted. But as a seafarer, he was not allowed in. So what are we actually seeing here? Is this the triumph of bureaucracy, or can we actually hope that there will be some new leadership for the new normal? I mean, as the business and all kinds of impacts of the COVID-19 crisis actually mounts, we see that leaders in every industry, as well as the maritime, really must move urgently to protect the workers, the seafarers, but as long as all essential workers, and also to build resilience. And governments all globally must mobilize to safeguard all citizens, not only shore-based, and also it's critical that we see some immediate action for the situation at hand now, but we also requires leaders to embrace a new agenda now more than ever. We need a new leadership. And I think the global pandemic, which has already caused really unimaginable devastation and hardship among a lot of people, it has brought my life to almost a complete halt, but there's no comparison to what they see out on the ship. And we know that this outbreak will have a profound and lasting consequences in most corners of the globe. But I'd like to go out on a positive note. I still hope, and I rather envision that the pandemic also is a window of opportunity for sustainable and also resilient transitions. So where we not only adopt this old linear view of the world, but we can get the society back on track after this crisis. And on that, I'll be happy to leave over to Lena, who's gonna tell us more about how we're gonna bounce forward.
Oh, thank you, Cecilia. I think you did already the best introduction you can get for Lena, so I would just be quiet. Lena, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm not sure that I have the crystal ball that everyone is looking for. But I was asked to think a little bit about what the signs are of the new reality in the maritime industry. And I think that before the pandemic, we had our challenges. We are usually not the first movers on anything. So the Industry Revolution 4.0 had just begun to make an entrance into our domain. But there were a few buzzwords before the pandemic. And even if not everyone spoke about them, I could hear that everyone was talking about environment, digitalization, and diversity. In short, that is sustainability. And I think from what I can hear now that we will be talking about the same things moving forward, but maybe with more power and passion behind these words, because we have now experienced a pandemic. So the crisis has meant that our industry, as many others, have come up with a few realizations about the weak spots that we have and where we need to shape up in order to survive, to be better, to be developing. And the reset of the entire society is an opportunity for us all, both us in the maritime industry and as for many others. As Cecilia said, there are things that we could change now. We could take this window of opportunity and do something even better. So the way we want the future to look like, that is what we want to start building now. Now is the time for things to happen. So Mikael, he spoke about the problems on board the ships. Yes, the crew members are the unsung heroes of this pandemic. Together, of course, with all the people that works in hospitals and as caretakers, but not a lot of people recognize the work that all these crew members have done, because the trade has still gone on. People were worried about the toilet paper at the beginning of the pandemic, but there was no real crisis because there were a lot of crew members working on the ships that also delivered the toilet paper. And it makes me happy that you are all bringing up the topic of branding, that we are rather not so good at talking about what we are good at, because that is my soapbox. That is what I've been doing my podcast about for the last 5 years. We need to tell everyone what an exciting industry we are and how good we are. But we failed to do that previously. I think now that people have realized that it has been a problem to explain to all the governments that they needed to explain it to what we do, what kind of work we do, that we need to work on our branding. And I know that some of the people that are trusted to try and do something about the whole situation that Mikael was talking about, what needs to be done, problems with the governments not knowing much about the shipping industry, or health authorities in these countries that didn't know that there was maybe a transport department that worked with the maritime and the mariners. So I think now is the time to do something about our branding as an industry. And we also need to do that because we need all the young people to choose us when they are now choosing an industry where they want to work for the future. So I think that this pandemic has been a game changer, actually, when it comes to being more visible. It has been the same as with another problematic situation, and that was Brexit. I have heard friends from the UK saying that Brexit meant that all of a sudden the people in Britain realized that they lived in an island. And maybe the pandemic can also make governments realize that where would we have been without the shipping industry? Yeah, and in addition, I would say from the outside or from the inside out, I think that we as an industry have also realized that we are only a part of the complex global supply chain. So we need to step up to the plate of the other transport systems so that we can all work together to have these global supply chains working more efficient and maybe working together to make it easier for our clients, our customers, and everyone else. And hold on, I lost my thought here. So let's see where we were. I got carried away. That's what usually happens when I'm talking about the maritime industry. I think I'm not alone in that. We are used to doing business the old-fashioned way. We are used to handshakes and looking into each other's eyes and you know, that way of doing business. And that also means that we are used to delivering papers on the quay side, may that be to customs or to shippers, and there is someone there with that big amount of cash to pay all the people that is waiting for their cash. But during this pandemic, these people were at home, isolated, or they were ill, they were taken into hospital, which means that everything stopped. And I listened to a webinar a few weeks ago with some of my friends in the Far East, and they were talking about what difficulties that made to the entire trade, that the people were not there. So maybe it's time to do a little checkup on what can become digital in this, and where do we need the people, the humans, to do things that is still done the old-fashioned way. It was not particularly good for the industry that it was a business interruption, because there were no people there to work or to do the things that they should be doing. So there is a cry out for digitalization of the trade and on the maritime industry. And if you think about that, to take a container from Europe to Asia, according to Port of Rotterdam, I had to say that because it's not something I will make up. It takes 28 different parties that are involved in one container. And there must be ways to make that less touch points for humans, and maybe to do it more rationalized. In addition to that, the average time to settle an invoice in 2019 was 36.8 days. That's a lot. And during this pandemic, during 2020, as far as we have come now, it has risen to 37 days. Well, that is not good for the business either. So maybe we need to look at that. And I see a mind shift among the forerunners in this industry, that digitalization of the entire world also need to move into the maritime industry, into our domain. Our outdated processes need to change. We need to digitize global trade and become more efficient. Data is the new oil. How many times have we heard that? The maritime industry is full of data and have just started to realize that we can do something with it. We can transform it into information and process it, and then link it and store it, and either a human or a machine can look upon it, and then it becomes knowledge to us. The shipping industry has always held the card close to the chest and not been willing to share anything with anyone else. And where there has been IT systems in place, not everywhere, they have been like silos inside the organization and not sharing anything with anyone else. But now I can see some forerunners in the industry, that there is a willingness now to share information with others, to gain more information myself, or to gain more useful information from others, and by that growing. Of course, it's not a matter of sharing business information, secrets and things like that. It's more about, for instance, in a port call, you share information with the other stakeholders in that port call, so that everything goes smoother, maybe it's better planned, and everyone is doing their business. So as a total, it becomes more efficient. Yeah, I hear a lot about digitized trade, digital ports, smart shipping, and working together in a large ecosystem rather than carrying on like we have done before. But in order to create this digital world, we need standardization, and that is now on the agenda. We need to know that the data that we will be sharing or receive from others is standardized and that we can trust it. And the standardization needs to be global, just like everything else we do in this industry. We are a global industry and we need global rules to follow. And I hear demands that the regulatory bodies also needs to become digital. So it made me really happy to see in the news the other week that the postponed meetings that were held or should have been held by IMO, the International Maritime Organization, the UN body, the ones that were postponed this spring will now be resumed and discussed online, digitally. So a series of key environmental meetings will be held digitally. Decisions will be made at a distance. I think that is very appropriate, especially when it comes to environmental meetings and that people should be discussing how do we move forward and become the heroes of the climate change that we want to be, but yeah, then maybe it's appropriate to discuss that online and not be traveling to and from London as usual. Changes birthed of necessity have great potential. We have seen proof of people's initiative power during the pandemic. Companies have had to maybe restructure, and some of them have changed their business into helping people out in the crisis. We have seen a willingness to change, and I haven't seen that before in my lifetime. So as Cecilia said, now we need some bold and calm leaders to take us through the crisis and into this new reality. And I think that the maritime industry would benefit from some strong, bold female leaders. It starts now. What do we want the future to look like? Thank you.
Thank you, Lena. Oh, that was very inspiring. So it's kind of hard to pick up the ball now and try to get the discussion going. But we have already received our first question, and that is probably directed to Mikael, but I would of course like to hear the others also take a stance. So how realistic is an IMO-ILO visa?
Yeah, it's good to see the question before so you can prepare a little bit. I would say that it's pretty realistic. Of course, it has to be formed in a way so it's not used by, for example, refugees who want a one-way ticket to another world or in any way of that. But I would say that it's pretty realistic, and I would say the key thing to reach there, it's for either IMO or ILO to say that we want a global visa, and we can stand behind it. That I would say it's the main thing. And if they say it, of course, it could be for an example a convention, and everybody has to sign up for it, and then it goes live. And if, for example, the US does not sign many conventions, then it doesn't work in the US. That could be a way forward. But I would definitely say that it is possible, not the next 2 or 3 years, but maybe in 10, 15 years, I would say definitely it's realistic.
Yeah, and I mean, it also goes back to the point that all of you three mentioned, that people are the key asset within the maritime domain at the moment. It's what makes the system work. And I think that all three presentations really keep me thinking about that. I mean, although I work in maritime most of the times, I'm not really out there, and I don't do that much. I mean, I'm a typical, I would say, office monkey, so I spend most of the time within within my office. So given that I'm representing kind of this research side, you all three are experts and you all are in contact with the domain. What would you like to see from us as resilience communities, as office monkeys? What should we focus on so we can help bring about that change? We can help digitalization, we can help diversity, and we can help the domain to find a new normal. What's the most important we should do?
I don't know if I go first. I think what we as researchers in general, and the resilience community in specifically also need to do is we have failed to communicate why it's necessary to have a new view. Why is it necessary to have a systems perspective, to build more resilience? And also, how can we go from this rather theoretical perspective and make new waves and advocate this new view of how organizations could work, just for both safety but also for performance. So making it understandable and going from theory to practice, I guess.
I can only add to that I think that would be wise to communicate what your findings are and why. But also, I think we have a lot of elderly seafarers and people in the maritime industry still, and they will be there for a while. And what we usually hear is, no, we can't do that. We've tried that before, or no, I don't think so. No, we don't need to change. And then we have a rather young generation that is coming in and they don't realize, why can't we test, or why can't we change, and things like that. So there is a gap, and maybe you could help us explain to the old and to the new, so we come middle way in a way, if you get my point.
Thank you. We can try that. So, Mikael, how can we support you? What did you think we researchers and people within the resilience and safety community could do to help you get the message across about seafarers as key workers?
Yeah, I would say two things. From one, what Lena was talking about, is standardization. That is something that I definitely have big hopes in the future. We have seen it in the aviation for a long time, and even if you're from Thailand, or if you're from Norway and you go on board the same airplane, you can work with either which captain from all over the world, but that does not work on a ship. You need to have at least 2 or 3 days to get to know each other. So a standardization of the safety systems would be, and another one is communicating and not communicating as we say here over Zoom, more communicating over the same level, because all these actors within the shipping industry, they're talking their own language. We from the union, we talk one language. The maritime, the labor supplying countries they say one word, which means for another country it's something else. So that we speak the same language all over all the different parties within the maritime industry. That's something I would like to address to the researchers to focus on. Thank you.
Thank you. So we heard that some of the changes on the way. However, we still need to find a way to really get and bounce forward and find these new forms of organization. So I wonder what should happen within the maritime domain, well, short term and long term. So where should we be by the end of this year, and where should we be within 5 years? What's most urgent? What should we do?
Well, that's a good question. That's how you start when you start thinking about an answer to that. I think we need to know where we stand. It will be the same in every industry. We need to know where we stand now, because so many things have changed. I mean, both when it comes to staff, people around you who is still working here. I met with someone yesterday and I said, how are you dealing with this pandemic? How many people are you in the office? And he said, I don't really know right now, because so many people have lost their jobs. We have to start somewhere to sum up, where are we now? And then we need to have a plan. Where are we going? And we need to learn from other industries. As I said, the supply chain, I mean, we are only the ones on water, on water. There is other ways of modes of transport on land and in the air and so on rail. Maybe we can work together. Maybe we can see the benefits of having unexpected marriages, as they say nowadays.
In the short run, I sincerely hope that at the end of this year, at least all the seafarers still stuck on the ship has actually gone back home. That's the first one. And in the long run, I very much hope that we will actually learn from this pandemic and take the next step and see that change is not only inevitable, it's also can be lead something good. And while as an engineer, I of course have a traditional strong view on standardization, but I also want to highlight that there is of course no one size fits all. So there still must be some freedom within the frame to actually be flexible, so that we don't get stupid trying to get this perfect fit that fits everybody at all circumstances, of course. I think there's some, is it a question or?
I think we have a question in the chat.
Yes, there's a question in the chat that came from outside. So there have been some references in today's discussions on how the industry keeps running for cover under the umbrella of stronger regulation as pressure increases. So what is missing for the industry to adopt a less central control-based perspective? So we heavily rely on central organs making decisions and regulations, recommendations. And how can such organizationally and geographically dispersed kind of operation work towards a more suitable approach? So.
I think that if that looks like if we are running under the umbrella of stronger regulation, I think we are a global industry. We need global rules and regulations, and that's probably why we think that that is the silver bullet. I'm not sure it is, but at least when for instance, the EU tried to regulate the maritime industry or the shipping industry, yeah, but the ship is maybe not always sailing in the EU waters, or maybe I mean, if you look upon the global supply chain, there are production maybe in the Far East, and it's coming to Europe or going to the States, and we need to have regulation that is working all the way around. Otherwise, we will not be as efficient as we can be.
You're the lawyer, Lena, so of course you're keen on but it's quite fun that we're actually running for this regulation pressures, because I mean, if you go back in history from the 16th century and the freedom of the seas, the maritime industry has always been rather reluctant to follow any regulations. But of course, as you say, I mean, it must be a global, we must have a level playing field. It's very difficult to make business when other players on the same market can actually go below prices because they cut on working conditions and human rights. And that's why we need regulations. But also we need regulations to actually start to follow them, and must have some consequences if you don't. And as in other domains and areas, the regulation has been increasingly more function-based rather than very prescriptive and detailed. And I think that is also something that we need to change over the years in the maritime industry, to make room for technical development and innovation, and see that there are different ways of doing things. And make sure that the regulations are not stupid as they are now.
That is an interesting point. Once I did a study on board and I was told there is no way to really load the vessel without breaching any regulations, because whatever you do, you will finally end up in doing something that is not according to some of the regulations we have. I would also like to hear Mikael's take on the question. So what is your take on the regulation and centralized control issue?
Yeah, I have a little bit of the same point as Cecilia, but my biggest concern is that the companies that has taken a little higher cost for having a better educated crew and taking a more responsible, environmental, healthy ship, or that they don't die out during this crisis, and that they are pressured out of the system, and that the shipping companies that just are on the bottom and can really take the lowest freights to the lowest cost, and that they will survive this crisis. And that's my concern, that the real good ones are getting pressured either out or pressing down towards their this spiral, the ongoing spiral of lower costs of everything within the shipping industry. So that's I would say that's my focus now, that hopefully they can live, and hopefully that we as the whole industry can do what we can do to let them survive, because they are struggling now, and that's my biggest concern now.
And I also think that we, if we not only look upon ourselves as industry experts or researchers, we also have to go back to ourselves as consumers and ask ourselves, is this really a sustainable way of doing things? I mean, transports today are too cheap. As consumers, we are not paying the price that it actually costs to transport things. And of course, the shipping industry, they don't really want the transports to be reduced. We still want to have an increased transport need, but we must pay the price. It's not reasonable, it's not sustainable that we actually take fish and shrimps from the North Sea and ship them across the globe to Asia to have them peeled or filleted and then shipped back. I mean, that is not a way to do it. And when we see what consumer goods costs in the shops, we don't pay anything for the transport, and that has to change so we can actually offer safe and sustainable transports.
Which also goes back to my soapbox about us telling everyone the work that we do for everyone else, and that we are the backbone of global trade.
Last line. I was about to basically close the discussion now. We've got 3 more minutes. So first of all, thank you 3 for sharing your thoughts with us and the community. Thanks to the attendees for attending. As I said before, this session is recorded, so you can find this online and share that with friends. It will be posted on the Resilience Engineering Association's website. So I encourage you all to regularly check the website. We publish all the webinars there. The next webinar will be in about a month. Then the aviation industry will try to share their thoughts about the effects of COVID and how the industry has been affected. And of course, please support the Resilience Engineering Association. We are an association, membership is on a yearly basis, and we hope that at least some of you got interested in that. So, and now after the commercial, the large summary. So I think at least what I take away from today is that there's lots of good that can come from a crisis, but we need to see that we need to make those that lend us the adaptability and flexibility in the domain, that make that we do not run out of toilet paper, especially not in Sweden, that we make these people visible, and that we also see the opportunities within the domain through increased digitalizations, through new forms of leadership, through new forms of organization, and maybe also thinking about the opportunities we can seize. Maybe a global visa, and maybe it's not going to come today, and maybe not tomorrow, but it's something that we can make possible. And with increased diversity and new types of leaders, we can also shape new job profiles and actually see through that we become sustainable, both technologically, ecological, and socially sustainable. So with that said, we are almost done. There's 1 minute left. If any of you has a final thought to share, please feel free to do so. No. Otherwise, thanks a lot for sharing your expertise with us. And especially thank you, because I know that you are not traditionally located within resilience engineering. So this has been very, very valuable for us within the community. And we hope we can find more ways to support maritime better in the future. So thank you. Goodbye.